אני אתחיל אז. ערב טוב, אתם הרבה וזה כיף. Welcome to hiCenter, ברוכים הבאים ל-hiCenter. מי שלא מכיר אותנו אז אני אספר ממש בקצרה עלינו. hiCenter בעצם נמצאת בחיפה מ-2008, הוקמה כחממה טכנולוגית ביוזמת החברה הכלכלית ועיריית חיפה, במטרה שתהיה פה חממה טכנולוגית ליזמים. במשך עשור hiCenter התנהלה כחממה, השקיעה וליוותה יזמים, ויש יזמים שהתחילו וצמחו כאן איש אחד, והיום הם חברה גדולה של 17 ו-14 אנשים וחברות מאוד מאוד מצליחות. היום בעצם מ-2018, לקראת סוף 2018, התחלנו לעבוד על הנושא של אישור hiCenter כרכז הצעה מאושר לנושא של פלטפורמה להשקעות אמנים שנקראת iFund. אנחנו עובדים על הפיתוח של הפלטפורמה, וברגע שנשיק אותה אז זאת אומרת נעשה השקה מאוד גדולה. הנושא של הפלטפורמה זה בעצם השקעות המונים. בשוטף מה שאנחנו עושים, hiCenter ממוקמת כאן בלב העיר התחתית עם עוד הרבה גופי יזמות בעיר, כאשר המטרה שלנו לקדם יזמות בהייטק בחיפה. כל המשרדים כאן מאוישים על ידי סטארט-אפיסטים, סטארט-אפים די מתקדמים. פה במתחם הזה יש חלל עבודה משותף שסטארט-אפים בתחילת דרכם בדרך כלל יושבים פה. המקום הוא ללא עלות, במטרה שבעצם נוכל להנגיש להם מקום לשבת ולעבוד בו. מתקיימת פה הרבה הפריה הדדית ומקצועית בין היזמים, המון ידע שעובר. בשוטף יעל מיטלמן, נעשה כזה קצת העברה, שהיא מנכ"לית hiCenter, יום שני בדרך כלל בפגישות במרכז, אז זה יצא כזה יום כזה שהיא לא יכולה לומר לכם שלום. יעל מיטלמן וליאור חנוכה שהוא סמנכ"ל הכספים בעצם נותנים מנטורין וליווי וייעוץ בכל הנושא של גיוס הון, השקעות, מודלים עסקיים, איך להתכונן לפגישה עם משקיע, ואלו נושאים שהם מאוד מתמחים בהם מעל עשור ויותר. זה מה שאנחנו עושים, זאת אומרת, עם יזמים משלב הרעיון ועד השלב סיד ופוסט-סיד. בעבר בעצם כשהיינו חממה טכנולוגית אז עסקנו במימון וגיוס השקעות, שזה גם יקרה במקרה של ה-iFund. תשתיות ומשרד ותוכן זה המשרדים שאנחנו נותנים פה לחברות, וכל הנושא של המרחב עבודה משותף. בשוטף אני ליזה קורן, לא הצגתי את עצמי, מנהלת שיווק וקשרי קהילה כאן, מארגנת המון שיתופי פעולה עם כל גופי היזמות בעיר ולא רק, גם מהמטרופולין, גם מתל אביב ובכלל, במטרה בעצם להנגיש אירועי תוכן והשערה מקצועיים. יש פה המון סדנאות. ב-13 לפברואר תהיה לנו כאן סדנה עם IBM בנושא של ווטסון, בטכנולוגיית ווטסון, ותהיה לנו איזושהי סדרת סדנאות. ליווי עסקי כמו שאמרתי, פיתוח קהילה, ויש לנו מועדון משקיעים. אלה חברות שבעצם גדלו ב-hiCenter, דוגמה לכמה חברות. יש פה חברות שעדיין נמצאות פה, ויש חברות שהן כבר צמחו ונמצאות עדיין בחיפה, אבל במשרדים משלהם. iFund סיפרתי, ושתודה, ושיהיה היום בהצלחה ותהנו. אני אשלח לכם מחר, זאת אומרת אם אפשר לחלוק את המצגת, כן? אז נשלח למיילים שרשמתי כאן, ומי שיאשר לעקוב אחרינו בפייס ובלינקדין אנחנו ממש נשמח, ככה תוכלו להתעדכן באירועים שלנו ובפעילות שלנו, וככה לדעת עלינו גם קצת יותר, ובתוכניות ההצעה שאנחנו אוטוטו נשיק. שלכם ערב טוב, תהנו.
ברוכים וברוכות הבאים למיטאפ השישי של DataTalks חיפה. אנחנו שמחים להתארח היום ב-hiCenter. הזדמנות להגיד תודה לאליזה, שארגנה כל מה שקשור בערב הזה. תודה. תהיו לנו היום שתי הרצאות ממש מעניינות. ההרצאה הראשונה של טל שניצר, דוקטורנטית במעבדה לעיבוד אותות ותמונות, בפקולטה להנדסת חשמל בטכניון. תספר על הפרויקט המחקרי האחרון שלה. מיד לאחר מכן דניאל ארונוביץ' ממייסדי ווקליס. יספר על הטכנולוגיה מאחורי המוצר שהם פיתחו. וזהו, שיהיה ערב מוצלח.
Hi, so I'll speak in English. Hopefully it will go okay. I'm Tal. I present my recent work under the supervision of Professor Ronen Talmon in CP Lab in the Electrical Engineering faculty at the Technion. And our recent work addresses sensor fusion, which is based on manifold learning techniques using geometric modeling of signals. And I will show an application of this method to fetal ECG recovery and a small extension of it. So currently there are many data sets which have a lot of sensors that record information which can be different or similar. For example, if we have recordings of brain activity, then it can, if we want to record brain activity, then we can do it using EEG signals. EEG electrodes, and EEG electrodes usually come as a cap with 32 or 64 electrodes. And another example is the fetal ECG example, or in general ECG recordings of heart activity, which I will elaborate on later. So when we want to combine information from these sensors, from many sensors, the question is how should we do it and what we want to extract. For example, we could want to extract the common components. For example, in the EEG application, then common components extracting the common components from two electrodes can assist us in attenuating sensor-specific noise. And also it can show us something related to the state of the brain, for example, related to some disease state. But sometimes we also want to find the differences, as I will show in this application, in the fetal ECG application. So in general, this application addresses heart rate recordings during pregnancy. So currently when a woman is pregnant, the fetal heart activity is recorded usually using two ultrasound transducers, that are placed on the abdomen. And these recordings are rather useful, but they're very bulky and can be done only in hospitals or medical services locations. And also the ultrasound is more expensive than a simple ECG electrode. So another more efficient approach to do that is using two electrodes that are placed on the abdomen of the pregnant woman. And in this situation, it can actually be used to also do Holter measurements, meaning continuous measurements over prolonged periods of time, which can be very useful when there's some health concerns regarding the pregnancy. So in relation to the sensor fusion and the model that we are assuming here, so we are assuming that the abdominal electrodes capture two signals. They capture the wanted fetal signal, but they also capture the maternal heart activity signal. And this is because the maternal heart activity is very strong, and it's so strong that it sometimes covers completely the fetal heart activity. And so what we assume here is that the maternal heart activity will be seen from a similar view in the two electrodes, whereas the fetal heart activity will be seen differently because it's closer, the fetal heart is closer to the two electrodes. So an example of a partially synthetic ECG trace from two electrodes, I will elaborate on how this was created a bit later. And so in this segment we have under our assumption, similar heartbeats, similar complexes which relate to the maternal heartbeat, and we have complexes that denote the beats, but they are seen from different views, so they look differently, and these correspond to the fetal heart activity. So this was synthetic data that we created, but in a real recorded data, it can look like this. So here, it's really hard to distinguish between the fetal beats and the noise. The strong complexes that we see here are the maternal beats, And we have here some other peaks, some of which are noise, and some of which are the fetal beats, which are marked now by blue asterisks. And moreover, why this problem is hard, if we look at the spectrogram of this signal, we see this image, where the black line here is the base frequency of the maternal heart rate. But it also has harmonies because it's not a sinusoidal signal. And these harmonies can completely cover the fetal signal, which is already much weaker compared to the maternal heart activity. Okay, so how do we approach this problem? We approach this problem using manifold learning. So manifold learning techniques are especially useful when we don't know a lot on the data and when we don't have much data, and when the amount of data is limited, and especially when it's high dimensional. So if we have a set of high dimensional points, it could be hard to compare them because of the high dimensions. They can all be far away from each other. So it's hard to learn patterns from the data. So in the manifold learning approach, what we assume is that these data points lie on some manifold, and instead of characterizing data points, we try to characterize this manifold. And this is done by constructing some kernel, some matrix, based on the data points, and this kernel matrix actually captures important geometric structures of this manifold. And from this matrix, we can obtain a new representation which captures the important properties of the data. So this leads to an unsupervised data-driven, based only on the data points, representation with minimal assumptions. So some small examples for that. If we have a very simple example of points that are located on some manifold in 3D, but we can see that the meaningful information here is in 2D. If we apply manifold learning techniques, then we get a representation in 2D of the points colored according to their location on this sheet. And a slightly more interesting problem is if we have a set of images, so each data point is an image, and the dimensionality of this point is the number of pixels, so it's very high dimensional. If we consider a set of images where the images differ from each other in a rotation only, and we apply a manifold learning technique, then what we get is points on a circle. So if we have such data set, the black points correspond to other images of rotated Yoda. So what we'll get is this circle, and the points that correspond to each image are located in a manner correlated to the rotation angle of Yoda. Okay? And this is without knowing anything on what we actually have here. Okay, so what's our problem formulation? So we assume we have two sensors, and these two sensors, we assume that they lie on two manifolds. And instead of comparing the data sets, we want to compare the manifolds themselves. We assume that there is some transformation between these manifolds, and our goal is to recover common structures, similarly to the EEG application I talked about. We want to recover components which are common to the two sensors, for example, the maternal heart activity, and we also want to extract and characterize the differences between the two data sets, or the two manifolds, where considering the sphere and the sphere with the bump here, the common will be the areas of the sphere which are round and common to both of them, and the differences will be the bump. Okay. So there are several related work that address this problem from a manifold learning approach or an operator-based approach. I didn't mention it, but when I say operator, I mean the matrix P or the kernel P. The most relevant one is alternating diffusion, which I'll shortly discuss, by Lederman and Tolmon. And there are several others that compose operators from different manifolds, but all of them address extracting the common. We also propose a method to extract the differences in a related manner. One method that relates to extracting the differences is recent work, not so recent, but the shape difference operator. But this work specifically focuses on comparing shapes and is not easily extended to high-dimensional datasets. Okay, so In order to discuss the related work and my work, I'll begin with some background. So background on what are diffusion operators and the diffusion distance. And all of this is based on diffusion maps. Diffusion maps is one manifold learning technique proposed by Koifman and Lafon in 2006. And what this method does is, given a set of measurements, of n measurements, we construct a diffusion operator, P, the kernel matrix, and diffusion coordinates. So P is constructed by constructing a Gaussian kernel based on the distances between all the points, divided by some kernel scale that defines which set of distances, which range of distances we're interested in. And then we normalize this matrix to be row stochastic, meaning that the sum of the row of all the rows equals 1. When we do this, we can view this matrix as a Markovian matrix, as a matrix that describes a Markov process, the transition probabilities of a Markov process, which I'll address shortly. And from this matrix, we can obtain a new representation by taking its eigenvectors and eigenvalues. So why are these? I'll just first talk about the diffusion operator, and then I'll talk about the representation. I don't know what this should be, epsilon, I think. Okay, so if we have the operator P, the matrix, it's called diffusion operator because after we normalize it to be row stochastic, we think we can take a unit vector which has 1 at one point for 1 point in the data set and zeros everywhere else. So if we consider here a data set that actually has two classes connected with a bottleneck, some bottleneck between them, then and we can construct for these points the diffusion operator based on the Gaussian kernel and the distances between the points. And then we can take this matrix and simply multiply it by this vector. And when we do this, the new vector will represent a diffusion according to this matrix, and this would capture the structure of the data set. Okay? So from this matrix, we construct a new representation to capture the geometric structure of the data set, and this is true because we can show that the coordinates, the Euclidean distance between the coordinates themselves, can approximate a diffusion distance on this data. So what is a diffusion distance? A diffusion distance, I will demonstrate using a simple example. So if we have a network of friends, the diffusion distance is defined based on the number of paths connecting these friends, or the points. So for example, in this graph, these two goals will be close because they have many connecting friends. But if we consider this graph, then these two goals will be farther away because we have only one path connecting them. And why is this distance useful? If we go back to the example with the two classes with the bottleneck and color them according to the coordinates which approximate the diffusion distance, we'll see this coloring. And this is a comparison to the simple Euclidean distance. So if we have this red point and the diffusion distance of all the points from it, we can see that points in the same class are closer compared with points in a different class. And this is, in the Euclidean distance case, points in the two classes can be in the same distance, and this is simply because we just measure the distance from the point itself. So what we see here is that the diffusion distance captures the geometry of this problem. It captures the fact that we have two classes with some bottleneck between them. Okay, so that was the basics of diffusion operators, and now I'll discuss the related alternating diffusion method, which extracts common variables in data. So given two such diffusion operators for two different data sets or two sensors, then we construct the alternating diffusion operator and coordinates by simply multiplying the two Markovian matrices. So intuitively what this does is first we propagate the diffusion based on one kernel and then on the next one. And then again we can propagate diffusion based on the first one and then on the second one. And in total we get an averaging of the difference components, and we are left with components that are common to the two matrices. And from this matrix, we can obtain a new representation, not using eigenvalue decomposition because it's not symmetric, but a slightly different method. And what they showed in the paper is that the Euclidean distance between this new set of coordinates approximates the diffusion distance based on that we would have obtained if we had access to a common variable in the two data sets. Okay, so we don't know what's common to the two data sets, and we extract it in a data-driven manner. So a short example of such a propagation of diffusion on the sphere and the sphere with the bump. If we take some vector, again, this should be 1. It was only 1 here in my presentation before. So if we take a point, 1 point, the point that's colored in orange here, and apply the first kernel or the second kernel to this point, and apply the alternating diffusion operator, what we'll see is this. So in alternating diffusion, we first apply the first kernel and we get this propagation, and we compare it to only applying P2. So what we see here is that the first diffusion step is rather similar. This is a bit larger, and that's because the distances on the sphere are closer compared with the distances on the bump because it's stretched. And then we apply the second step, P2, and here we continue to apply P2 and continue to apply a few more steps. And what we can see is that, when we consider the alternating diffusion propagation, then we see approximately an average distribution based on a common structure based on the smoother sphere. And if we advance it only according to the second kernel with the bump, we see here that the bump indeed affects the diffusion propagation. Okay. So our operator, one of our operators is related to this operator, so I'll come back to this in a second. So our recent work is titled Recovering Hidden Components in Multi-Modal Data. It's a joint work with Professor Mirella Ben-Chen, Leonidas Gibas, Ronen Termon, and Autin Wu. And it was recently published in a SIAM journal. So the outline of our proposed method is that we have two sensors, again, and we have data sets from the two sensors. We assume that we have known correspondence. For example, if we have two sensors that measure time series, then the timestamp could be a correspondence, a known correspondence. And from each kernel, we calculate the diffusion operator, the corresponding diffusion operator, and then we combine the two operators in one manner to extract the common revealing operator, and we compose them in a different manner to extract the differences. And from these two operators, we construct new representations, one for the common structures, and here we can see a smooth coloring of the sphere, and one for the differences, which characterizes the bump. Okay, so our algorithm is this. We take two diffusion operators, which I remind you that they are defined in this manner, as I showed before. So we take two diffusion operators for two data sets, and we want to construct two operators. We denote by S the common revealing operator, and by A the difference revealing operator, and from them we construct two representations. So the definition of our operators is rather simple, but we showed using also in a continuous setting, which I won't show, and also in a discrete setting, motivation for choosing such operators. So the common revealing operator is defined by first applying the transpose of the second kernel times the first kernel, and note the transpose here, plus the transpose of this element. And the difference revealing operator is defined similarly, but with a minus sign. And from these operators, we extract the common representation and difference representation, which are related to the eigenvectors of these two operators. So the reasoning behind this choice is, first of all, S the S operator is symmetric. So we can simply obtain a new representation by taking its eigenvectors. So it's guaranteed to have an eigenvector decomposition. But what's more nice about it is that if we take two doubly stochastic matrices, meaning that both the row and the column are sum up to 1, then we also have the meaning of the Euclidean distance between between these coordinates that it approximates the diffusion distance that we would have obtained on the common variable if we had access to it. So this is similar to what we showed in the alternate diffusion case. And the more novel definition is the difference revealing operator. So this operator, in the way it's defined, is anti-symmetric. And we can show that because it's anti-symmetric, it has imaginary eigenvalues and a complex spectrum. And we can show that the real and imaginary parts of these eigenvectors are orthogonal. So we can take them as a new representation. And what's nice about this operator is that if we take this dataset, for example, two datasets, each having n points on them, and construct the A operator, this is the A matrix here, then this will be an n by n matrix relating to the number of points on the two datasets. So if we look at row I and row J and column I, then it will be we can show that it will be non-zero only if either J or I are on the difference area. So it will look something like this, where the regions where both I and J are on the difference area is much higher. So what this means is that we take two data sets which we don't know much about, and then using the row sum of this matrix, we can highlight the location of the differences. Okay, so this is what we get for the sphere and sphere with the bump if we take the row sum of A. So it's highly localized on the difference area. And what's nice about the coordinates that we define is that if we look at the norm of them, then it approximates this row sum. So they all are also highly supported on the difference area. Okay, so some results based on these operators. So the first are example that I discussed until now, the sphere and the sphere with the bump. So what we did is took the one data set of points sampled on the sphere and the second data set of points sampled on the sphere with the bump, and constructed a diffusion operator for each. And from these two diffusion operators, we composed operator S and operator A and their representations. So first of all, we colored the sphere and sphere with the bump according to the new representation from S. And it looks like this. So we got the first three coordinates of the new representation based on S, and we see that it characterizes the smooth sphere structures, which are related to the common structures between the two. And when we colored these spheres according to the difference representation, we got a nice result that shows that these coordinates are localized on the differences, on the difference region, and moreover, it actually characterizes them as we have here some spherical harmonics localized on this bump. Okay, so it's actually the basis of this sphere shape. Okay, so back to the more interesting example. So we went back to the fetal ECG example, and we started with a partially synthetic example. And what this means is that we took three real ECG segments, one from one person and two other from a different person that were captured from different electrodes, meaning that they have a correspondence, but they see different views of his heart rate. And we defined one ECG segment to be the maternal ECG, and it is common between the two sensors up to a scaling, so we can not simply subtract the two. And we added to it the two different ECG segments from the second person. So we have here two different views of the second ECG segment, of two different views of the second person, which denotes the fetal heart activity. And when we constructed the new representations based on A and based on S, and the way we did it is we looked at time frames of each sensor and constructed a matrix for each sensor, and then from these two matrices constructed the S and A operators and the representation. So what we got here is this representation for A. This is the first two coordinates, and this representation for S. And each point here represents one time frame in the two sensors. So when we got this result, first of all, we saw that it's nice that we got that S is shaped in a circle, because circles represent some periodicity in the data. So this this represents that there is some periodicity. And when we colored it according to the maternal ECG, we got this coloring. So for A, it doesn't mean much, but for S, we got a smooth coloring, meaning that these coordinates actually capture the periodic or quasi-periodic maternal heart activity. And when we now colored it according to the fetal heart activity, we got this coloring. So now S doesn't mean much, but A is smoothly characterized by A smoothly characterizes the fetal heart activity. Okay, so to demonstrate a bit further, we took the first coordinate and thresholded it and colored the one ECG segment according to the highest values. So we can see here that the first coordinate of S, the common, actually captures the maternal beats, and the second coordinate, the first coordinate of A, actually captures the fetal beats. Okay, so this was a synthetic example. A code for this is available on GitHub. And then we went to real data, which we took from PhysioNet. So this data is actually measured from two sensors located on the abdomen of pregnant women, but we don't know where exactly each measurement is located, so it can vary. And also the maternal heart activity can also vary. As we can see here, that the two maternal beats are also from different views. Okay? So I remind you again that our setting is that we have two sensors that capture, we assume that we see a similar view of the maternal and a different view of the fetal. And these are the two signals. Again, it's hard to identify exactly what are the fetal beats, and now they are colored by a blue asterisk. And when we calculated a slightly more sophisticated spectrogram, time frequency analysis of each channel, we got these two results. So we have here a line. This sophisticated spectrogram actually takes all the harmonies and compresses them to one base frequency. So what we got here is one line in the two channels, and based on ground truth, this line corresponds to the maternal heart activity. And we cannot see here at all the fetal heart activity. And when we applied our method and constructed the difference revealing kind of spectrogram to it, we got this result. We can see here that we have a significant enhancement of another line, and based on ground truth, we can see that this line is exactly the fetal heart activity. So we recovered here the fetal heart activity in a completely data-driven manner. We didn't know much about this data. So using our method, we applied our method to the PhysioNet dataset, which had 68 subjects. And in the task of heart rate approximation, heart rate recovery, we obtained results which are comparable to state-of-the-art. And why is it nice? Because the approach that obtains state-of-the-art is highly specific to this application. It looks for periodicity in the data and removes the maternal heart activity, and then looks for periodicity in the remaining data. And we did not assume such a thing of periodicity. We simply took two channels and constructed our operators and obtained results which are comparable. Okay, so, and just to remind you why this task is hard again, is that if we look at the real spectrogram of the data, it looks like this. So the harmonies of the maternal ECG are much stronger compared with the fetal heart activity, and cover them. Okay, so this was our recent work, and now I'll present a small extension of this work to a different application. which is the geometry-aware feature selection. So we are currently working on it, so it's just initial results. And what we did is we used the difference revealing operator for feature selection. So if before we looked at a set of features and samples and constructed a matrix which is sized samples by samples, treated different time frames, for example, now we transpose the matrix and look at differences between the features. So we take a data set, which we know for some of the samples we know its labeling, and we take these samples and separate them into the two classes. And then for each class we construct a diffusion operator. I'm sorry, I should have used my my computer. So this is just R. So it's a matrix of size feature by feature, and then we combine them to construct the operator A, and constructed the new representation. And what we saw is that this new representation enhances features that are different, that actually make the two classes distinct. So two small toy examples that demonstrate it is the first one is we took data which is sampled from a Bernoulli distribution, either 0 or 1 with probability half. So each data point is 50 features, each drawn from a Bernoulli distribution. And the label of each such point is the XOR operation between two features, just two features. In this case, it was feature 5 and feature 12. So what we have here is a data set. Here, for example, we have 50 features and 300 samples. And from the 50 features, we have two informative features, 5 and 12. And the other are simply noise, in this case. So we took these samples and we took the known labels of the samples and divided them, each sample based on its class, constructed the operators for each such data, and constructed the operator A. And when we looked at the first eigenvector of A, what we saw is this result. So we have, we highly emphasize the 5th and 12th features, which are in fact the informative features. And what's nice about it is that here we showed it using 300 samples, but this can be obtained with as few as 50 samples of this example. Okay, so a second nice example is also a toy example. We took the MNIST dataset, and we took 100 labeled 4 images and 100 labeled 9 images. And we vectorized them and constructed two matrices, one from each, which of size pixels by the number of pixels by the number of pixels in each MNIST image. We combined these operators to construct operator A, and we got this result. So what we see here is the average digit 4 and the average digit 9 of the 100 images that we took, colored according to the first eigenvector of A and the second representation vector of A, where red means higher values. So we got here an emphasis of certain pixels, and by viewing it we can see that these pixels look informative, because we have here the pixels that close the 9 compared with the 4, close the curve of the 9, and also pixels that are located on the edge of the 4, and also pixels related to the usual angle that we write 9 compared with 4 in these 100 images at least. So to assess this feature selection, we applied a very simple SVM classifier based on all the pixels or based on just the highlighted pixels. And we got a significant improvement in the results. And I want to emphasize that the point here wasn't classification, it was just to verify the choice of features. And when we looked at the Tisney plot of either all the pixels or the only highlighted pixels, it looks even nicer. With all the pixels, the 4s and the 9s look something like this. Whereas based on the chosen highlighted pixels, then we get a much nicer separation between the 4s and the 9s. And this can be also, we got also nice results for 8 and 3, where the regions of the closing of the 3 and the 8 were significantly highlighted. Okay, so this was our recent work. So what I showed is operators that are fully data-driven, meaning that we construct them knowing nothing about the data. And they recover common structures between two sensors and differences. And it's especially useful for sensor fusion when we don't know anything about the data and when we have very small data sets. And it's completely unsupervised, so we can get a new data set which we know nothing about, or several sensors or multi-modal data, and study it using such operators. And we demonstrated these results for fetal heart rate recovery. This is another nice example of enhancement of the fetal heart rate. And we have an a small extension for it in feature selection. And that's it. That's my research.
Okay, so thank you everyone, and thank you Tom for organizing and Lisa for hosting. So my name is Daniel. I'm the co-founder and CTO of Vocalis. Soon there will be a slide about the history, so I'll tell you more about myself. I'll start first with what we do. So we use voice, as I use it now to speak, as a biomarker, especially for healthcare related outcomes. Okay, so we all using voice. Most of us use some kind of a voice assistant, well, especially in the US. It's non-invasive. Again, we use it all the time. Passive, meaning we don't require users to do anything special. And the main idea that I'll try to convey here, and that's the main focus of the talk, is that voice carries health information. Okay, so that's what we do. Because it's a data hack, I'll talk about what kind of data we have already. So we record speech of various patients with various diseases. Over 50,000 patients. We already have over 1 million recordings. Okay, so we have a large data set of voice, which is labeled, which is important. So it's not, as Tal was talking about, an unsupervised problem. All what we do currently is a supervised problem, meaning all the voice recorded are labeled. Okay, so we know the status of the patient on what disease he or she has. Then we have various collaborations here in Israel and also in the US. So now I'll move to some history. Okay, so this is 2015, BizTech in the Technion. Probably few of you know about it. It's an entrepreneurship kind of competition. And so back then, I was a PhD student, also in electrical engineering in the Technion. Prior to that, I worked at Intel and Microsoft as a senior algorithm engineer, mostly working on 3D cameras. And at the first year of my PhD, I met Shadi, Dr. Shadi. He's back in the day was an internal medicine physician, treating patients mostly with chronic pulmonary diseases in Carmel Hospital here in Haifa. And he came with the problem that he treated patients and they were released home, and then they had a flare-up, they came back again. So the idea was how we can monitor them at home. And at the beginning we thought about hardware, but eventually we came out to the idea that let's use the voice. Okay, so we were in the finals of BizTech. Then we raised money and I left my PhD. I finished 1 year. I always joke that my grandmothers always ask me if I'm sure if this was the right decision and when I'll get back to finishing it. So now we raised money, and actually last year, a few months ago, we raised a round A and merged with one of our competitors here in Israel. So we were Healthy Mice, they were Beyond Verbal, and now we're as a merged company, we're Vocalis. Okay, so this is the new merged company, almost 20 people. We have Ksenia here in the crowd, she's working with me. Okay, so this is history. I'll give you some more outline about what kind of diseases we tackle. So mostly now we are focused on COPD, which is a chronic pulmonary disease. Similar to asthma, patients, they have flare-ups, can happen up to a few times a year. And when they are breathless, and then they get hospitalized, oftentimes it's too late. Okay, so there's a lot of hospitalization, but also high mortality to COPD. It's the third or the fourth leading cause of death in the US. Okay, depends on which year. So this is a big problem. Also, we look into other diseases like depression, sleep apnea, CHF, which is congestive heart failure, where fluids aggregate in the lungs because the heart is not working properly. So also the speech is affected. And the idea is, like everyone, it's a platform, But the idea is to give the customers, which I'll talk in a second, a lot of vocal biomarkers. So not just one, but a plethora of various vocal biomarkers. And the voice can come from mobile phones, from personal assistants at home, from the car, which in the future, of course, everything will be recorded. And from the perspective of who's going to use it, so of course we monitor patients, but they are not paying. Okay, the customers are the payers, HMOs, or here in Israel, Kupot Cholim. Okay, so they actually insure patients. So if we reduce hospitalizations, for example, for COPD, we save a lot of money to the payers or providers. Of course, we have collaboration with pharma companies. They're also interested in this kind of technology because when they develop various drugs, nowadays they use questionnaires. So especially, again, respiratory diseases, they develop a new drug, they ask the patient to fill in a questionnaire. We can objectively measure if the drug is improving its status or not. And also, of course, insurance companies, and maybe in the future, consumer, actually going to the end patient. Okay, but now we're not doing this. Our main product offering, so we have 3 products. I'll talk about one today. It will be the monitoring one. It's the work that was previously at Healthy Mice, which is now actually, it's in development, but soon we'll be able to sell it this year in Europe. I'll have one slide about a triage solution. So here we get one phone recording or voice recording. We don't know anything about the patient, no history, no metadata, nothing. And we give some kind of prediction of a future hospitalization. But it could be general, not just specific disease, general future hospitalization. And the use case is call centers of nurses. So today we have it here in Israel, also Maccabi and Kalit, nurses that call chronic patients at home. And the idea here is to do some kind of prioritization of which patient should be called first. Okay, now it's like random. They have some kind of a protocol, but we do some kind of prioritization. Those patients you should call first. So this is one product. It came from what was previously Beyond Verbal. Okay, so I have one slide on that. Our main focus will be about the monitoring solution, how we monitor specifically COPD patient over time, meaning the patients record each day their voice, and we can detect if they're breathless, which is one of the main reasons for flare-up. Also, we work on various screening solution, meaning, again, like a binary classifier. And given one voice recording, do you have COPD, do you have asthma, do you have sleep apnea, etc. Okay, so this is like a screening solution. The idea here is to use the voice as a thermometer, right, to see where you are on the spectrum. Okay, so this is one slide about the triage. We call it vitality, from one voice recording to get the probability for future hospitalization. We trained on over 10,000 different patients, and the testing actually was on 2,000 patients. And this was published as a I think it was an abstract, but now this year is going to be published as a full medical paper, so we don't go there inside the technical side, more on the medical side. But I can show you here, if you can see, this is time, 1 year, and this is the probability for hospitalization. Okay, and this is the highest 10th percentile, decile, and the lowest one. So you can see by taking a voice sample 1 day, we can predict, depending where the patient falls on this, with this biomarker, his future hospitalization. Okay, so if somebody falls in the top 10th percentile, probably he'll be fine. But if he falls in the lowest 10th percentile, his chances of hospitalization are much higher. Okay, but this I would not touch in this presentation today. My focus will be about remote detection of shortness of breath. Okay, we call it the WAVE product just because it's short and it sounds nice. The idea here, patients, they get an app for the phone, they record each day. Okay, so now I'll describe you the patient journey. So what happens to him? So, for example, there's Richard. He's a chronic COPD patient, so I told you about it. A few times a year, he can suffer a flare-up. And he released from emergency room 3 weeks ago. They give them some kind of a protocol, how to take their medications. Mostly they take inhalers, similar to asthma, to manage their state. But unfortunately, he had a flare-up, or in the medical terms, exacerbation. Okay, and he was rushed to the ER again. The idea here now, he gets prescribed with an app, okay, to monitor his shortness of breath. Moves by itself, and then far away, his physician, his caregiver, can look at the dashboard. Oh, it's moving too fast. And see the status. Okay, and he's speaking once a day, and he can see if at some day his shortness of breath is increased. Okay, and then the physician can contact the Richard in our case, and we know, and also this is known from literature, that early detection of flare-ups could reduce them and also prevent hospitalizations. Okay, so then he can give him, again, as I said, various inhalers, steroids, antibiotics, depends on his condition. Okay. So let's move to the technology slide. Okay, so this is Richard. Let's see if I can play the...
$50, $51, $52, $53, $54, $55,
He's counting.
$56, $57, $58, $59, $60,
Till 70.
$62, $63, $64, $65, $66, $67, $68, $69, $70.
Okay, so you can hear he's an elderly patient, but quite easily he can count. Maybe you're doing it better than him, but still that's a good situation. And now let me play the second day before we talk about... So this is the second day.
50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57,
He's
58,
breathless.
59, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64.
Okay.
65,
Okay, we need to listen to the end.
66, 67, 68, 69, 70.
Okay, so this is an extreme case, okay? And I gave it specially for the demonstration purposes. But the idea here is to catch something like that, okay? Can happen a few days prior to the real flare-up and prevent it. Okay, so what we do is each day we have a recording. Okay, so I have recording of this day, which is 2 days ago. This is the recording of yesterday, again, for example purposes. So the first thing we do is some kind of a sound event detection, okay? we run on the recording of the patient and detect where he was speaking, in this case the counting, where he was breathing, taking in-breath and out-breaths, and if he was coughing. Actually, for this product, we didn't use the coughing at the end, but as part of our building block of sound event detection, we developed also a cough detection. Okay, so I'll present here the results regarding cough, but the actual product was using also speech and breath. So again, first we extracted all the parts when there was speech and breath from each day, then some kind of statistics on them. We can tell for a pair of recordings if the second one is better than the first one, worse, or the same. Okay, so in this case, you agree with me, he was worse on the second day. So okay, our product does the same thing. Okay, 2 recordings, and it tells like a 3 classes classification problem, if it's better, worse, or same. Okay, so in this talk, I will concentrate mainly on this part, this building block of the algorithm. I would not go on how we did the high-level features, and also wouldn't go to our current methods that we do it. Okay, so this is something that we can expose, but I won't go to what we're doing now, again from intellectual property reasons, but at the end I'll touch a little bit about what we are currently doing. Okay, so how we doing this building block? So I guess most of you have background in machine learning and signal processing, but maybe not. So I have 2 slides, maybe 3 slides about it. It's okay. You can laugh with me, but let's do it. Okay, so what's machine learning? How I look at it and how other people look at it. So I have some kind of a feature. Here in this case, how many years a person was educated. And the output or the target is how much income he is going to get in the future or currently now. Okay, so we have a data, right? We have distribution of various people, their years of education and their income. And now what's the machine learning problem or the statistical problem? I have a new patient with a purple heart comes and he says, I have 13 years of education. Okay, I was on the SAE or something. What will be my income? Okay, so what we do, you look, what you do with your eyes, you look, okay, he's somewhere, he hits here, and he's gonna be around 30. Okay, so this is the machine learning problem. I need to fit some kind of a curve to my data, and then a new data comes, and I infer it from my curve. Okay, so eventually, if I can summarize, that's what we're doing in general in machine learning. Okay, so it's not so difficult. Again, supervised. Okay, so I'm not talking about unsupervised problems or reinforcement learning. Talking about supervised machine learning. That's what we do. We do sophisticated curve fitting, and also I quote Judah Pearl. He says, all the impressive achievements of deep learning amount to just curve fitting. Okay, so first, let us all acknowledge it. Okay, I'm not saying it's easy. Okay, I'm just saying that we need to keep it in mind. But this thing here is complicated, okay? It depends on each problem, which features we take, how we do it. But this is my slide on machine learning. And of course, you can generalize this to more features. So now we have years of education and seniority. And then we can build, so this is an example of building like some kind of a linear regression problem. Okay, so this was the machine learning part. Now you can ask me, which features are you using? Okay, because the input is a recording. Okay, so it's an audio, mostly sampled at least at 8 kilohertz per second, but we work in it. It's rare, at least 16 kilohertz per second. So there's a lot of data, right? 1 minute of voice recording, there's a lot of data points. What do I do with it? Okay, so there are classical methods. I'll touch on it, but what we do is a spectrogram. Okay, so Tal also touched about it. We converted with short-term Fourier transform to a spectrogram. And here you can see with your eyes maybe, this is a speech part. Okay, so this is the frequency, this is breathing, this is speech. So the signature, the spectral signature is different. Okay, so if we can see it with our eyes, hopefully some kind of a classifier can also see it. Okay, so we take a problem in audio and convert it to a computer vision problem. Right, we have images now. Why? Because computer vision, at least a few years ago, was much more advanced, and then we can use tools from computer vision to solve problems in audio and speech. Okay, what's frequency representation or Fourier transform? How many of you heard of Fourier transform? Okay, most of you did, but still some of you didn't. The idea here is I don't care which kind of function in time you give me or in space, I can represent it as a combination of sinusoidal functions. Okay, so what various function here, I can say, okay, maybe it's a combination of this sinusoidal function and that, etc. And here this is a nice graphic illustration. So when I take one frequency, I can get like a sinus. Okay, and this is the amplitude. Now I added the second component, let's say, with a smaller amplitude but higher frequency, so it's turning faster. And when they're combined, now I get something like that, which more shows some kind of patterns of some kind of data. And then I add more frequency components that are going faster, smaller amplitude, and I get a better approximation of my signal. Okay, so the idea here is to give you some kind of motivation why we are going in the frequency domain, which is the spectrogram that I showed you. Okay, so the data that I worked here, so the problem again is given a voice recording to detect exactly where the breaths and where speech, and in this case also cough. The training data, we had 50 people, data from 50 people, but it was a lot of recordings per person. Again, this is partial data. I'm not disclosing everything. We tested on 25 people, of course, different people. It's funny, but oftentimes people make mistakes and there's leakage, right, of training and testing, so it's important to pay attention. And the metric that we use, how accurate we are, is the F1 score. Okay, so why not regular accuracy? Because maybe I have a 1 minute recording of a patient and he had one breath of 1 second out of this 1 minute, right? So if I build a classifier that says all the time he's not breathing, the accuracy is really high because actually most of the time he's not breathing. Okay, so that's why I need to use a metric like F1 score that takes this into account. And this is what is used in the literature. I have recordings here of breath, cough, and speech. I'll play it. Okay, this is cough.
50.
Okay, this is counting.
52. 50.
I cannot stop it, sorry.
50. 51.
Let's see. Oh, okay, we move to the next one. So what we're trying to achieve here, first, one of the most important outcomes for us is to build a sound event detection that is robust to noise, because eventually the patients will use it in a real life scenario. They're going to record it maybe in the office, but maybe outside in the traffic, and there are buses coming and going. So our classifier that detects cough, breath, or speech should be robust to noise. Okay, so our baseline was a random forest classifier on MFCC. Next slide, I'll touch on it. Those are classical used features in speech recognition. And you can see here, this is a clean recording, and this is the SNR. And we add noise to the recordings, and then SNR goes down to simulate an environment that the recordings is in a noisy environment, and also the F1 score goes down. Okay, so our motivation is not just improve this clean recording, which what mostly people are doing when they're trying to find a better classifier, but also vastly improve the robustness to noise of the classifier. Okay, and we tried various deep architectures, not only, but this will be the focus of what I'll present you. There's a fully connected neural network on also MFCCs, CNN and CRNN. I'll touch on it. So the MFCC is male frequency capsule coefficients. It's similar to other frequency representations like Fourier transform, but the idea here originally was to do some kind of a representation of our ear, the human ear, when they do the frequency representation, and then there's a logarithmic scale, because that's also how the ear works. Doesn't really matter what was the motivation. The fact is MFCC is one of the most useful features. Okay, and how it works, each 25 or 40 milliseconds you extract a vector of MFCCs. Okay, so eventually from this step you have a lot of dimensionality reduction already, right? Instead of getting really like hundreds or thousands samples, here you have a few hundreds per second or a few thousands. Okay, and then on top of that we run with, in this case, a fully connected DNN, and each sequence could be a second, half a second. We output the class that we detect, if it's breath, cough, or speech. Okay, more, let's call it sophisticated if you want it, is to run CNN and CRNN. So now we do, instead of MFCC, we do spectrogram. Actually, you can do a mel spectrogram. So it's similar to MFCC in a sense. It's going like halfway to the full MFCC. The idea here that we're gonna input images to something that works well on images, which is convolutional neural networks. Okay, and in this case we just added RNN, actually an LSTM, in order to give some kind of temporal representation, even though I don't know if that really what helped us. Okay, but I will discuss the results soon. Okay, so here are the results. This is the interesting plot. So here's the SNR, it goes down, and this is the F score, it goes up. The baseline is the random forest, and you can see I plotted it before. The table showed how the F1 score goes down as the SNR goes down. By the way, practically there are no recordings with zero SNR. You can hear what the person is speaking, but this is I never saw a scenario like that, but around 10, 20 SNR in dB, that's a scenario that can happen with noisy recording. Okay, so this is an important place we want to tackle. So you can see here, going just from random forest to a DNN on the same MFCC, we improved a little bit the accuracy, the F1 score, but the noisy conditions didn't really help much. But convolutional networks, or if they are with an LSTM, helped quite a lot. Okay, so here we have like a 10% increase in accuracy. Okay, so this is already significant from what we were trying to achieve. So we weren't looking to find the best classifier, meaning the highest accuracy at clean environment, but the classifier that will be the most robust. Okay?
Do you know human level performance on this? Or it will be 100%?
No.
If a person try to recognize this?
Depends on the SNR. So I didn't check it, but at some point you cannot hear even. So I saw that some recordings you cannot hear, but it detects. Okay. So why it works, meaning why CNN in our case worked better than DNN. The idea here, because we transform it into an image, so now in this case something happened. This is the time, This is the frequency. There's some kind of event happening. This is not breath or cough. This is some kind of maybe something falls on the floor. And this is clean environment. You can see the background, almost no noise. Now when you add noise to it, you can still see the structure. Okay, so the motivation here, even though that there's noise and quite a lot of noise, the classifier, in this case the CNN, can detect the structure. Okay, so it's relevant because we build products that they need to run in the real world environment. Okay, so it's not just getting the best accuracy that we can and beating some kind of state-of-the-art paper, but actually make it work in the wild. Okay, I hope that that was a good laugh. Just a second. If you have questions, let me finish. I have like 3 more slides, and then we can discuss. So the summary of the product in general. Now we have the web app and the mobile app. Important thing I didn't know, when you do medical stuff, there's regulation. Well, I heard about it, but you never know how hard it is until you actually start doing something that is regulated. So because the data that we had is for just COPD patient with age 40 and 80, the product that we have can only be sold to those kind of patients. Okay, we cannot sell it to other people. It's illegal. We have to specify the intended use. That's also tell us what kind of a class, meaning if you go to FDA in the US or CE mark in Europe, how you describe what the product does depends on the class. So if we add here monitoring, then we'll be in a different class. Okay, so there's a lot of work with regulatory advisor how to define the product, the performance. So this is the performance of the total product, not just the breath and speech classifier, but the one that compares pairs and tells if are better, worse, and same. We did a clinical evaluation. So regarding to a question, we gave pairs of recordings like you have listened to now, and we asked 3 physicians to label if it's better, worse, and same. Okay, so that was the validation, which it's actually the test, right? That's the real test, but in clinical sphere, they call it clinical validation. And that was the ground truth. So we had a lot of pairs. The ground truth was 3 physicians, the majority agreement between them. And that was our algorithm. And we can see there's high sensitivity, specificity. And I just can tell for medical device, in the threshold is around 80, 85. Again, depends on the intended use or the claim. So this is a good result. Okay, so just to summarize, we utilize Envoice to monitor the health. We have a really unique data set and also the problems we deal with. Probably we have the largest data set now in the world regarding voice, which is labeled. And we're probably the largest company in the world doing this. It doesn't say a lot because nobody is still selling, right? It's not like there's a lot of competition. All the competitions are other startups, mainly in the US. And it's not easy. Most of the work is on the data and how to prepare it and clean it and make it useful for our machine learning pipeline. As I said, regulation. You always have to think about it. And more meaning there's a lot of business, let's say, obstacles in the future. But this is less my domain. But I still want to say that it's important. And probably the company that will succeed is the one that will solve not the machine learning problem, but the business problem. But this is relevant for everyone, right? I'm not saying something new here. But because we're engineers, we oftentimes forget it. And we are hiring people, so you can read that. Again, nothing against headhunters. I work with some, but we're looking for. Actually, also we have software positions, but I'm looking mainly for machine learning people. Also, people with software background previously. I like them the most because I have 0. again, prior to my work, I was mostly academia or research at Intel and Microsoft, so I love people who know how to write code. So this is my email. If you want to send me whatever, right? I'm not saying CV, but whatever, you can reach me. It's daniel.aronovich@vocalishealth.com. And important thing, vocal is health. Okay, so there's a pun intended, because vocalis means vocal in Latin, right? So we didn't think about it at the beginning, but it came out nicely. And that's it. Thank you. And if you have questions, then